Hello, hello. Welcome to The Wrap. I'm Travis Fain, one of WRAL's state government reporters.
And I'm Will Doran, another state government reporter.
Yeah, Will, new-ish here at WRAL. You've been here about a month, right, from the News and Observer?
Yeah, about a month now. It's been going great. Very busy.
Yeah.
It's been a busy session.
Yeah, we've bolstered our team. We're glad to have Will. And speaking of busy, so it's Friday afternoon right now, and we woke up this morning to a bunch of missed messages because Speaker of the House Tim Moore had been in a car accident. What police say and what the speaker says is that someone, a DWI driver, had just slammed into the back of a Chevy Tahoe the speaker was riding in. He has a security detail, a police officer with the General Assembly of Police who drives him hither and yon around the state. And they were coming back from Wilson to Raleigh when this guy just kind of rammed into him, Will.
Yeah, and it seems like you said it wasn't intentional. You know, most lawmakers have license plates on their cars that say, like, a specific number and say this person's a House member, a Senate member. Sounds like he wasn't driving one of those cars.
He was not. And Moore has, his own personal car with a license plate. But this is an undercover. It's a black Chevy Tahoe, undercover police vehicle. So it's got the lights, but like they're hidden in the grill and in the way, not on top. Like you cannot tell this is a police vehicle or an official vehicle. And yeah, so I mean, the guy apparently rammed into him like 3 or more times, Moore said, as they're flying down the highway. Looking at the vehicle, it was backed into a parking space where it was right up against the wall at the General Assembly, so I couldn't really get behind it to see. But I couldn't really see any damage. The speaker said the damage is very minor. But you know, if you're going down the highway and someone not only hit you once, but then hit you twice more at least. I mean, at the time they thought they were being attacked.
Yeah, that would be scary. Absolutely.
Absolutely terrifying. But it turns out, no one was injured, and it turns out police are saying, we just think this was random. They just happened to hit this vehicle, and yeah. So
and from the other guy's perspective, can you imagine? I mean, one, you should never be driving drunk. 2, you hit a car, and then all of a sudden, police lights go off in the car, and
right.
You're just like, oh no.
Right. That's that. Yeah. And I don't know how in it this guy was. Apparently, so the police lights go on after he rams into the car, and he kind of tries to go around does go around, and then the police officer, who's driving the speaker, his name is Jason Perdue, by the way, this officer. They basically tail him, follow him, and the speaker told reporters today that this guy just kind of came to a stop in the left-hand lane. I think this is on 87 coming into Raleigh, and eventually moved over to the side. So it sounds like, based on these descriptions, he was pretty inebriated. But yeah, we're very thankful that this did not go worse, because it certainly could have been. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I will note, North Carolina General Assembly Police, they're real police. They have arrest powers and all the other powers that police have around the state. The speaker has a security detail, kind of like the governor or the lieutenant governor. So that's how that works. I'm sure people who don't know the ins and outs of that have some questions. Let's talk about the state budget briefly.
So you're going to bring people in with the exciting news of the speaker in the car crash, and then you're going to make them listen about the budget. That's the plan?
Yeah, and let's pretend like there's something exciting at the end of the podcast, too. It's just the middle.
Oh, yeah, we're getting to the good stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I sat through a 2-hour-long budget meeting the other day, and we will try to keep the podcast significantly shorter than that.
Yeah, we're just come in, about an hour and 15 minutes. And no, so the presentations are going on right now to the various budget committees, and you kind of learn about how the budget works. I don't know that we're going to get into that. The first thing that usually happens as the legislature tries to come together on a budget, it is not, well, let's just wait for the governor to put out his budget proposal in in March, which is kind of what we expect. But the first thing that happens is the House and Senate leadership come together on a spending cap. They decide, all right, here's how much money we're going to spend, and then we'll decide how much gets spent here, there, and elsewhere. The House and Senate are talking about it. Berger, Senate leader Phil Berger, said on Tuesday that they hadn't hit on a cap yet. Maybe that's coming pretty soon. But that'll be the first step, and then we'll go. I think we're going to see big tax cuts, or at least some tax cuts on top of the tax cuts already planned. Like right now, we're planning to go down to 0 on the corporate income tax.
Not this year.
By 2030.
By 2030, yeah.
That's right. And we're also on a glide path to lower the personal income tax. You might see that accelerated. you might see an additional tax cut put on top of that. The Senate has, for a very long time, wanted to get rid of the franchise tax, which is a business tax. So everything we're hearing, Will, from both chambers really is that an additional tax cut will be part of this budget.
Yeah, well, and that's certainly what people are saying right now. It'll be interesting because the big budget presentation that I referenced earlier, the staff came in and they said, we're not necessarily predicting a recession in the next couple of years, but certainly a slowdown in the economy. And, things are not going to be booming quite as much as they have in the last few years. So will that give lawmakers maybe a pause on further tax cuts? I don't know. But that's certainly something to consider.
And I think someone asked Senator Berger about that earlier this week, and he said, well, we keep having these, we keep over-collecting beyond what we project. So I took that as to be he's not so worried about concerns about an economic slowdown. And North Carolina's economy does seem to be strong. But yeah, some small revenue decreases, actual decreases predicted, small percentages over the next few years, so in the out years. So you're right. We'll see. Real quickly on Medicaid, Senator Berger also said this week that there's no timetable to file a Senate bill. The House bill is out. It's basically just a straight Medicaid expansion bill. The Senate, of course, wants various regulatory reforms thrown in there. We talked about it many, many times. So if you're looking for Medicaid to get resolved soon, I don't know that the Senate is all that eager to get moving on that.
No, well, and Governor Cooper came out, this was maybe a week or two ago, and said, look, y'all really need to get this done by March. There's this, cutoff in June, and all of this is very complicated.
Right.
If people want more details, they can go read the article about it. But basically, there's, this cutoff coming up in June, and, the federal government is going to give the state $1.8 billion to just do whatever they feel like if we expand Medicaid. It's basically just like a you don't want to say bribery, but a signing bonus. We'll call it a signing bonus.
There's a signing bonus, and then there's also the HASP, which is for hospitals specifically, and is another $1.8 billion.
Right. And, with the change in the fiscal year in July, Governor Cooper saying this really needs to get done by June, which really means that you need to, take some action by March. And here it is, almost March. And like you said, we still haven't seen the Senate bill. The House has their bill. They've passed it. I don't think anyone expects the Senate to be big fans of what the House passed, just because, we went through this all last year. And the Senate's delay, I don't know if it's a negotiating tactic, because from talking with Senator Berger, he doesn't seem to have budged that much in his own personal opinions on what needs to be tied to Medicaid expansion to get his approval. So we'll see what happens. But
yeah, it's always a negotiating tactic. That's until someone tells me different. Also, abortion, no timetable on a Republican version of that bill, dialing back at what point in a pregnancy you can get an abortion. We know it's coming. We don't know when. The Governor Cooper, though, and North Carolina joined an association of something like 20 states, Democratic states, I'm assuming, where the governors are vowing to protect abortion rights. I don't know exactly what that means in practice, but I did see some national news coverage of that, I believe, this week.
Yeah, abortion's tricky because, obviously Republicans want to go ahead and get it done. They don't want to, the closer to 2024 it gets, the more of a political hot potato that becomes, obviously, given as, the broad national opposition that we saw to abortion in 2022. But at the same time, they do still have to get one Democrat in the House to vote on a veto override. And so, they have to figure out something that'll, be good enough for the GOP base, but that can also get at least one Democrat on board.
And also, you don't want to hang suburban Republicans out to dry, right? There are probably plenty of Republicans in the House and Senate caucus, probably more the House, who are nervous about what that bill is going to look like.
For sure.
One-time biggest donor in North Carolina politics, Greg Lindberg, who owns a bunch of companies, including insurance companies, and is under investigation all over the place. He has been indicted again. This is not the bribery accusation against him, which is still pending. He was convicted of bribery a few years back, trying to bribe, they said, Insurance Commissioner Mike Causey. He served some prison time. Then the Court of Appeals threw it out. because the judge had given poor instructions, the Court of Appeals said. So he's going to face retrial on that. I think it's probably in the fall.
November.
Yeah, there you go. Once was March, but it's gotten kicked into the fall. He has been indicted on separate crimes. These are basically money laundering crimes? I mean, is that a shorthand way to?
It's fraud. I can't cite the federal statutes to you, but yeah, it's basically, defrauding his own companies and other companies to inflate the value of his companies to get loans, and then also to just kind of skim money off the top for himself. And the feds say that this led to higher insurance premiums for all of his customers, as well as, unnecessary costs for these kind of, separate companies that he was doing business with. Now, if you listen to Greg Lindberg, what he told us was, this is all just made up, and, he's being railroaded here. And he said it's actually completely related to the bribery case, even though on paper it really has nothing to do with it, because he thinks he's going to win his bribery case again. And he says that they're only filing these charges now to basically pressure him because the feds are scared of losing that bribery case.
Right. He basically says that he's being framed by the state insurance commissioner, by the FBI, by the Securities and Exchange Commission, by a Wake County judge who found fraud among his insurance company. I mean,
everybody's out to get him.
Get in line, man. Everybody coming for this poor billionaire. I hope it works out for him.
We'll see. At one point he had several different multi-million-dollar homes around the Triangle,
right.
Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill, I think.
One of them had a tunnel in between, like a one building and an outbuilding. It was like a concrete tunnel underneath.
I think
nice.
the most expensive house ever in Wake County up in North Raleigh, he had some mansion up there, and prosecutors say that I don't think it was all of those homes, but at least some of those homes they allege that he bought with funds that he misappropriated from.
That sounds right. He also had a yacht called the Double Down at one point. I don't know where the Double Down is these days. But
I think the Double Down may have gotten sold off during his first trial, but I have to go back and look that up.
it is a saga, folks. I promise you. I want to run through some bills here. How about that? Let me hit one real quick, then I'll give you the CRT bill. But Senator Joyce Kravik's surprise medical billing bill. This is the one that requires, generally speaking, 72 hours notice if you're going, if you go into a hospital for a treatment, the hospital is in your network, so you pay a certain amount, your insurance company does, but a doctor or someone who helps you in that hospital is out of network. A lot of people get these surprise bills. They're like, wait a minute, now why is this more? The hospital would have to give you 72 hours notice. This is something that passed the Senate unanimously, I believe, last year, has passed the Senate again unanimously this week, and will be before the House, where I assume it will continue to not pass because that's been the fate in the past.
Yeah, it obviously faces some opposition from special interests who don't want to see it. But while the some bills are focused on policy and consumer protection, things like that, we've also seen, as everyone knows, a lot of just like culture war bills that are kind of in this broader national pattern. And one of those that we saw this week was a bill to ban critical race theory in schools. It's framed as kind of a both sides sort of bill. Teachers would be banned from promoting racism in the classroom, and issues like white supremacy. They would also be banned from talking or promoting issues like systemic racism. The idea that America, just the way it's set up, is kind of inherently biased against non-white citizens.
Yeah, and it's one of those bills where the language sounds agreeable. You read it on the page and think, oh, okay. But I always encourage people to think about how things will be implemented, the impact, whether there'll be a chilling effect in education, on the actual intent. But the language is like, it basically says you can't promote that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. You can't promote that an individual just solely by the virtue of their race or sex is inherently racist. I mean, again, this is pushing back on, like you said, ideas like critical race theory, but it limits the way race and racism can be discussed in our schools.
Yeah, and when Governor Cooper vetoed this exact same bill last year, what he said was basically like, this is just intended to scare teachers away from talking about issues like racism, talking about, exploring concepts, around slavery and the founding of the country and things like that. And, there's a provision that says, if a school brings in a speaker on any subject, say they're coming to talk about football, but if they have ever in the past expressed any opinions about critical race theory, then, school has to, like, one, do the due diligence to figure that out, and two, then report it to the state. So there, critics of this bill say it's just intended to have a chilling effect on just, not bringing in any speakers or curriculum or books or anything on that. Now, we have to assume it'll probably pass. The sponsor is John Torbett, who's the chair of the K-12 Education Committee. Having him on board, shows that it's probably got some support.
And it passed, I think, along party lines last year. So I assume, we're heading for another veto, and then we'll just see if the Democrats stick together on it.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
On the same kind of subject, the University of North Carolina Board of Governors passed a change in its application process, both for employees and students, basically saying, hey, you can't ask these DEI questions, these diversity, equity, and inclusion questions. I mean, if you've applied for a job or to a school, you've probably seen something that says, hey, tell us about how you value diversity and how we value diversity, so how would you aid that? So this is kind of targeting that. The language says that the university shall, quote, neither solicit nor require an employee or applicant for academic admission or employment to affirmatively ascribe or to opine about beliefs, affiliations, ideals, or principles regarding, I can't even read all this, regarding matters of contemporary political debate or social action. So it seems like very broad language, but that's what, we all know what this is targeted. It's the same idea, this critical race theory, discussions of racism, discussions of diversity, and this idea that that's important. So we shall see how that is implemented as well. But that passed the University Board of Governors this week.
Yep.
Bills to run through. Tell us a little bit about the ICE bill?
Yes. We have, this is what I think the third attempt at passing this bill to force sheriffs to work with ICE, even if the sheriffs don't want to. Basically, once someone is released from the county jail, whether it's because their charges are dropped or because they have finished their sentence or they make bail, for whatever reason, they're getting released. Sometimes ICE comes in and asks sheriffs, hey, can you continue holding those people behind bars for us, even though they're supposed to go because we want to come pick them up?
Yeah, Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE.
Sure, yes. Yeah, sorry.
I probably everybody already knows that, is listening to the 17th minute of this podcast. Bless you, people.
We love all our listeners. But yeah, so most sheriffs around the state, nearly every county already cooperates with ICE, but some of the big urban counties, which are also
Democrat
homes
counties
to, large Hispanic populations, say they don't want to do this. They say it makes people scared of cooperating with the police. When someone is undocumented and the police come around, their neighborhood asking for tips on a shooting or drug sales or anything like that, they say that this just makes people more scared of the cops and less likely to cooperate in investigations. So some of the sheriffs say they don't want to do this. There's also concerns that they'll get sued, for holding people when the people are supposed to have been released. There's questions of constitutional violations there. But this bill would override those concerns and basically force those sheriffs to work with ICE even if they don't want to.
Yeah, force particularly the sheriffs in Wake, Durham, Forsyth, Guilford, Mecklenburg, and Buncombe counties to work with ICE. Pistol permit bill also passed, I believe it was this week. Things starting to run together. But it passed the House, I believe, this week. Briefly, what does that one do?
Yeah, that has passed both the House and the Senate. And right now, when you want to go buy a handgun, you have to get a permit from your local sheriff. And so they'll run a background check on you. And they're given some pretty wide latitude to basically just be like,
yeah, I don't know about this guy.
Yeah, this is a bad dude. He's somehow managed to avoid actually getting collared for anything, but,
And sometimes it's based on mental health issues.
It can be based on mental health issues. It can be based on domestic violence issues. A lot of times people, domestic abusers, their victims will not cooperate with the police, so the charges get dropped, so they never get convicted. But, if the police have gone out to the same house 20 times, they know that there are domestic issues at that house. And so these pistol permits kind of go a step further than federal background checks do. And then this bill would repeal those pistol permits so that we would only have the federal background check system. And a big part of it for supporters of this is that it would really speed things up because these permit applications with the sheriff can take, a minimum of days in some counties and up to even a couple months in other counties.
And yeah, there have been some counties, I believe Wake County, one of them, where people have said they felt like sheriffs were purposefully sitting on these applications and just kind of taking their sweet time to
Wake
process
County got
them.
sued over it during COVID because it was taking so long, and people basically accused the Democratic sheriff of attempting to institute gun control by kind of slow walking these permits during the pandemic.
Yeah, this has been a top priority for gun rights advocates for a while, and the Sheriff's Association has gotten on board with the idea of getting rid of it. They say kind of the background check, the NICS background check, the federal background check you do when you buy a gun at a store would cover this. But I mean, that does leave the question open of personal sales. If I sell you, Will, a gun, I don't have to run a background check on you because I'm not a licensed firearm dealer.
Correct. And also there's a domestic violence angle too, which is even the people in North Carolina who do get convicted of domestic violence, that NICS system is actually legally banned from flagging those convictions because the prosecutors essentially charge them too broadly here. So the federal background check doesn't pick up those domestic violence convictions.
It's a loophole that at one point this bill tried to close, but that got stripped out.
Yes, actually there was a Republican-backed amendment to fix that domestic violence loophole, but then we heard some outcry from the gun rights groups, and suddenly that language disappeared.
Yeah, and so this bill at one point had a co-sponsor, Democrat Michael Ray, who, I mean, that would be the one vote you need to overturn the governor's veto, but he voted against the bill, even though he had co-sponsored it. Well, what do you tell you about that?
Well, it's always hard to say exactly what's going on behind the scenes, and, in the end, we saw every single Democrat did vote against this. And like I said, that happened after the domestic violence protections got stripped out of it. But what Michael Ray said was that, he had talked to some sheriffs in his district and discovered that there was some opposition to this. So, that, sounds like a reasonable argument. Hey, my local sheriff doesn't want this. This is something that affects the local sheriff. So
on this issue that has been around for the past two sessions, and I guess I didn't know that when I signed on to the bill a month ago or whatever. Sure. Okay. Real quickly, a bunch of local school calendar bills moved in the House this week. This is to kind of get around a state mandatory. You can't start before August. It's somewhere in the August 26th range that you're not allowed to start before. So those moved in the House, as they often do. The Senate leader, Phil Berger, says, nah, we're not doing that. The only thing we might need to change in this area are increasing punishments for systems that flout those rules. So the opposite of what the House wants to do. That's status quo on that. Medical marijuana bill, we expect that to be on the Senate floor next week. We've kind of been over that one before.
Yeah, this has been going on for a year plus now. There have been some minor changes to the bill, but it's essentially the same as what already passed the Senate last year and then failed to move forward in the House.
But we think it's going to move forward in the House this year. That's kind of the best bet we've got.
That's kind of the general vibe. Talked to Senator Bill Ray.
It's good vibes on that bill. You know what? I'm not making any more weed jokes.
I set you up for that one.
Come on.
No, I talked to Senator Bill Rabin, who's the lead sponsor on that powerful Senate Republican, and he said that he's talked to House Republicans, and there does seem to be more support for it this year. He made some changes in one committee that I covered recently. One that the Sheriff's Association had asked for, one that the State Medical Board had asked for, and then another one to basically tip the scales a little bit in favor of dispensary companies that want a license if they will agree to open more stores in rural areas.
Interesting.
Because we're only going to give out a very limited number of licenses. There's a concern that, they're just going to cluster in the cities. So kind of to help out some of the rural areas, they're going to
there's a requirement
tweak
that
the formula for these contracts.
I think some number have to be in Tier 1 counties, which is a measurement of poverty, I believe.
Correct. Tier 1, I think, is the 40 poorest counties in the state. It's basically all of eastern North Carolina, except for a few places on the coast, and then a little bit in western.
Also saw a bill filed this week to add police associations to the Criminal Justice Education and Training Standards Commission. This is an entity that kind of sets expectations for law enforcement in the state. This would put the Sheriff's Association, the Fraternal Order of Police and the Police Benevolent Association, I believe.
That is correct.
Would get seats on it. Sports wagering bill. As we talk, I believe we're still waiting on that language. But, I mean, it's been turned in, like staff is doing the, like, commas and whatnot on that bill. So I'm sure we'll be talking about
Yeah,
that bill.
our colleague Brian Murphy, who both of us sit next to, has been running around all day working on that. So I'm sure by the time people hear this podcast, he'll have something for them to read.
Yeah, I promise you want to know about that bill, WRAL.com. We'll be on top of it. Several agency bills filed this week. Folks probably know what that is, but I mean, it's literally a government agency says, hey, we want the following changes. They're usually like maybe 15 pages long, a bunch of different stuff. A bunch of those got filed this week. H-197, that's the Department of DIT, Department of Information Technologies bill. I'll just note quickly that it's got some changes to the GRATE grants. Those are the grants for broadband money. And basically right now you can apply for a grant to expand your broadband network in a certain area that's not served. But one of the problems that this program has had is that other companies have said, no, we don't want our competitor to get a grant to run out there. So we're going to protest that. So this kind of tightens the protest rules a little bit. A ton of those things have been protested. So the DIT wants to change that a little bit. H-199, that's the DMV bill. Among other things, it sets the state up for North Carolina to eventually start offering mobile driver's licenses. Will, did you know mobile driver's licenses were a thing? Apparently they're a thing in a lot of states.
I did not know that.
We're old.
My driver's license is very stationary, so
yeah, it just
sits there in my wallet and doesn't move around.
Yeah. So, but apparently you can get them on your cell phone, and we're going to kind of pilot.
Oh, that's what you meant by mobile driver's license. Okay.
What did you think I meant?
I was just joking about one that was walking around on its own.
Okay. The H-198, we're getting off the rails. H-198 is DOT's agency bill. It's a whole bunch of potentially interesting language. Need to look at it more closely. Give us a call if you've already looked at it closely. It seems to exempt some projects from state contracting rules. As I read it, would end a ban that we have now on spending DOT money on bicycle or pedestrian projects. That's kind of a big deal. There's billboards language in there. We fight about billboards every session or two.
The billboards never go away.
Never goes away. The license plate readers, these are the things that the police officers can use to like scan your license plate as you zoom by on the highway and then search and see if the car has been stolen. I mean, it's a privacy issue, but it's also a law enforcement issue because a lot of crimes have been solved this way. There's some language in there to permit that in more places. There's a significant, I think, change for HOV lanes, which no longer would have a preference for motorcycles, electric vehicles, or 15-passenger vans. That's in the DOT bill. Again, that's H-198. Probably deserves some more scrutiny. That is all I've got, except for maybe some stuff on next week's schedule. Will, you got anything else?
Nope. That sounds great.
All right. I'll mention briefly, Senate committees next week are taking up penalties for shooting up power substations. This is, people will remember the Moore County substation that got shot up and caused a blackout. We're going to increase penalties for that. That bill will be out. We think the medical marijuana bill probably on the Senate floor.
Yeah, Tuesday is what I've heard, but, subject to change.
And also Tuesday, the joint appropriations committees that meet this time of year, they will continue doing their thing. So if you ain't got nothing to do at 8:30 in the morning, you can go learn about that state budget.
They're great meetings.
They really are. All right, that's all we got. Thank you so much for listening to The Wrap. We'll get you caught up again next week.